agricultural design. He's also the founding member of Kaitiaki, the Guardians, which was formed last year in response to the 1080 aerial poisoning of the Russell State Forest. Brad will be sharing his work on the comprehensive ecological conservation model designed for the Russell Forest and to be made available to communities around the country.
Now those images are quite disturbing, and no doubt many viewers are feeling quite uncomfortable in their skin after seeing that. That is the reality of our current conservation model. So it goes without saying, we need an alternative model. And we call this the Ecological Sustainable Development Model for Conservation. What encompasses ecological sustainable conservation? Wildlife monitoring, constant predation, sustainable resource acquisition. Okay, because what we have now is an unsustainable resource acquisition for our industries. Ecological sustainable living, because at the moment what we have is big, massive suburbias that rely on you going to the supermarket and then having someone come and pick up all your filth and dump it somewhere else. Education, because we need to breed a new generation that's going to live with all of this considered. Right. Reinstatement of native ecosystems, because at the moment our wildlife has an area that is decreasing rapidly. It hasn't stopped. Now, when you look at ZIP and what they're developing, it seems like those areas aren't going to be increased anymore if what we're going to do is spend $280 a linear metre fencing off our conservation reserves. Economic growth, because what supports all this? So you need something to support it in this current society that relies on money for it to run. Kaitiaki is the most all-encompassing word that covers all of this. It was already here. And technology development. And we'll go in depth into these angles in the following slides. Wildlife monitoring. Replace surveys via tracking tunnels to monitoring via thermal camera drones. Provide up-to-date population concentrations to hunters and trappers. Provide up-to-date from a distance endemic bird monitoring to ecologists. Provide large game hunter assistance. Lower the cost of wildlife population surveys over time with more efficient technological monitoring. Create meaningful job roles in the form of drone contractors. So this is how it's going to work. That working area there, that's where we start from. That's our home in there in the Russell State Forest. 7 kilometre radius, that's how far current market drones can work from an operator. Alright, that's 4,500 hectares that you can monitor with a thermal drone. Off she goes. Alright, so what does this give us? Areas of high concentration target species. Rats and stoats, and even your possums. So we then send this data to our hunters and our trappers. They know where they're going. But instead we've got this stuff being done, if this is going to work. You might just have to skip this. I'll do a short explanation of this. This is a company called Cacophony NZ. You can actually look the Cacophony Project NZ. You can actually look them up. So what they're doing is they're working on a similar technology that's already on the market. It's got a thermal camera, it's about this small, and they put it in a AI device. So this AI device determines between a rat, the thermal signature, and rat stoat. And what they want to do with it is they want to put little mounts in the forest or attach it to a drone, and they're going to have some sort of paintball gun type weapon that shoots poison pellets that break on the skin, and the animal licks it off and then goes on and dies somewhere. That's the advertisement for it. Now the thing is these aren't man operated. What they want to do is they want it automatic. So it's flying around or it's in the forest. And if it identifies a child as being something else, that's the risk. So whenever we're going to introduce new technology, we need to look at it with skepticism. What's the risk? What's the benefits? Is it necessary? That's the biggest thing. Is it necessary? And we actually can't answer that question yet. We don't know what's necessary to maintain ecosystem balance. Because that's how you get net benefit in biodiversity, ecosystem balance. Now, what helps with this is sustainable resource acquisition. So making it more efficient via technology to obtain sustainable resources. And we advertise the demand for these resources to reach out to international trade partners who desire the sustainable resource we wish to offer. So we're not going to go and say, well, we want pine trees and dairy from you, so provide that to us. No. We're going to provide what suits us, and we're going to go, this is a beautiful commodity. Which one of you countries around the world wants to purchase it? Because that suits us. So currently, yes, currently within this model, we will generate possum fur because we're not using toxins. We will produce wild game and we will produce pet food. So there's your revenue. Through sustainable resource acquisition, we will also use scalable ecological food systems. So gone are the days of needing to use fertilisers and that sort of stuff. I haven't used fertilisers or insecticides or organic or chemical for the last 2 years. My productions are fine. Why? Because I learnt the ecosystem. I understood insects that were pests. I did things like putting flowers in that attracted the predators. I even bought predators from a company called Bioforce. So I learnt which pests I was having a problem with in my polyhouse or outside, and I would introduce predators to those pests, and that balance would be kept in check. In fact, I had problems with spider mite in my garden, and I bought the predatory red spider mites to help me out with that. I bought them once, and they stayed in the polyhouse for the last 3 years. They established, because when the mites that they eat go, they eat the pollen in the polyhouse from the flowers. So they stay there. So I don't have problems with mites anymore. Because if I used a miticide, and the ones that breed more profusely are your two-spotted spider mites, if I used a miticide on them, I would have killed the predator ones as well. And because the predator ones don't breed as fast as the other ones, I end up having more of the other ones later. Hemp. Does anyone know how many products we get from hemp? 20,000. Up to and above 20,000 products from hemp. Now I'm going to focus on one of the more important ones that sorts out our society. That is hemp shift. They use that in hempcrete building. That's probably one of the most healthy homes you can purchase. And guess what? You don't need to use treated timber in the framing. It preserves it. Right? And that leads on to something else we'll get to later on. Biofuel. If we have a climate crisis in terms of climate change, putting taxes on emissions doesn't stop it. Okay? Changing what we use and increasing the amount of area that is doing carbon sequestration, and that plant right there is the best at sequestering carbon out of any plant in the rest of the world. And it's annual. You're not running the forest for 30 years, sequestering carbon, and then through the process of cutting it all down, releasing it back into the atmosphere. That holds it in its herd. Oil for food, and more importantly, to save our forests, paper. Hives. This is called a ware hive. This allows the bees to make its own comb, and you can cut off the honey they don't need.
Wow.
Native timber. Now there's a research agency and a couple of doctors, and one of the websites that advertises their findings is called Pure Advantage. They've found out through data of doing totaler stands on old pine blocks, so the soil's not that great, is that it generates 4.7 times more revenue over 60 years than pine forest. 4.7 times. Now, if it was 2 times the amount of revenue, it would be earning you the same amount as doing pine stands, but getting you less resource. But it earns 4.7 times more revenue. So it's already better. The only thing that was missing was the data to prove that. Now everybody in their gut thought, you know, it's probably better if we sell something that's not available readily around the world because it'd be a high commodity. But they had to wait for the data to prove it. And how do we make this easier? So we're coming into the technology area. So we need to be looking at how we make this so scalable, small scalable systems can do a diverse range of industries from their own home. And that's where technology comes in. Now we don't need to put a chainsaw on a drone, but we can certainly have something small like this, easily developed, that's electronic, that prunes it. So you do not have to climb the trees. But you can climb the trees if you want to remain fit. There's that there, and that's probably too expensive for you. But as technology advances, and we get towards producing resources rather than commodities, we start to dig this country out of its $130 billion worth of debt. And this is something we don't have in this country yet. Hemp processing factories. The biggest money in hemp is in its processed forms, not its raw forms. Now you already earn $4,500 per hectare from hemp, which is already a huge amount. But you turn it into processed forms like shiv or insulation, possibilities are endless. Car exteriors, insulation, briefcases, hempcrete blocks. And we do this while we're living ecological and sustainably. The more expansive Māori word for this is Kaitiaki, which loosely means guardianship of the physical and spiritual realms. In the 21st century, what we need is a reliance on less space to produce more organically. Through clever implementation of technology and growing techniques, because you don't have to just grow on the ground, as you saw in that slide, you can grow up in the air, you can grow in pipes, all sorts. In that way, we can give more back to nature and have the time to nurture it back to balance. So that's how we not only prevent extinction, but that's how we reverse it. Because we're increasing habitat, we're increasing our dependency on less space, and making the act of being a kaitiaki an attractive lifestyle choice. So we do that via marketing. We've allowed the government and clever marketers to convince us how to live a really crappy, boring life day after day, same thing. We can use marketing to convince people that living a healthy, happy, free life is better. You know why? Because it's true. So we can live in small spaces and spend more time connecting with nature. Everyone has big, massive houses these days. But why do you want to live the majority of your life inside a box? Right? A box is to keep you away from the weathers so you can sleep nicely and have some chill time at night. You don't need to have massive amounts of space. And a lot of people are gravitating towards these forms of living because it gives them more freedom. I know, I tried it recently. And boy did it set me free. So this part here, that's the inside. Yeah. Alright, so that's clever use of space again. Here's another one. Now there's all sorts of movable homes that we can do, and there are people out there going out there and they're doing courses in it and learning how to build these sorts of homes. There's all sorts of small space companies coming out these days. And this is what a hempcrete wall looks like. 300 mil thick, breathable, and the whole act of building a hempcrete house is carbon negative. Now what that means is that you are sequestering carbon in the act of building a house rather than putting carbon out. You change the industry. If there's something up with climate change and carbon emissions, that's how you do it. You change the industry. Don't tax people. And these are for our intense small space people. I like to call them our nomads who just travel around. So you can imagine a drone operator might want to live like this, contract out, give data, drive around the country, give you actual data of your wildlife, and that's not just your target wildlife, but your bird life as well. 5-minute bird counts isn't good enough. And that's an earthship. They are, and they're a recycling sink too. Right? This is what I call solving multiple problems at once. We've got conservation issues, we've got a housing crisis, we've got plastic problems. So let's not find solutions to each individual problem, let's find holistic solutions to all of them. Education. For me, this is the most important thing, and this is what we're rolling out around the Russell State Forest at the moment. Te Hiringa o Te Taiao is a Māori environmental practices course we have been implementing at each of the numerous maraes around our ngahi. If the number of experienced Kaitiaki in your region is low, create a new breed within the mana whenua and community in the region. Show them how this is a meaningful way to live and introduce them to technology that makes it more efficient and does not compromise the environment. So help them come home. All right, everyone's gravitating to the urban areas because there's heaps of cool jobs there, technology, heaps of people. Bring them home. Don't give kaitiaki of our land to a department owned by a crown thousands of miles away. Take it back. There's a few photos from where we did a...
Excuse me a second, I'm sorry, but I can't hold it, but you put education there, and as an educator, I just can't see, I can only see 20, but of a big word.
Okay.
Where's the education? Beyond one thing.
Sorry, what?
Where is the education?
You want? I'll get you to ask this question again at the end, mate.
Where is the education?
Just listen, I think he's going to tell us.
So, the education that we're doing around the Russell State Forest is at the maraes. Okay, so what we're doing is we set out applications through Ringa Atawhai, which is the group that came up with the education model, and we're rolling it out in a way that's showing the mana whenua how to take care of our land. So we were doing possum leg hold trapping on this wānanga. The most important education that was coming out of that was the ethics around killing animals. The first rule that you're taught by your father or your mother if you're going hunting is to make sure that the animal does not needlessly suffer. So this is teaching our children to have empathy even when we are being a predator, not acting in callous disregard. We're actually doing one at the moment out at Ngāitonga. We've done two, one at Whakapara, and this one was at Horireti Marae. So then that comes to reinstatement of native ecosystems, because that's the one thing our endemic birds need more of. More native ecosystems with their food. Okay? That's the extra benefit of going back to native timber as well. Kahikatea, berries twice a year, right? Pine forests, pine cones, food. So we have the technology, the education, the innovation, and the prosperity to make small space sustainable farming, forestry, and industry more profitable and productive with less land. So we should give back. It would also help our tourism industry to have more natural splendour to enjoy, not to mention improving our children's quality of life. So where I live, we've gone and designated areas that would have been something else before the farmer before us cleared it for grazing land. We're not interested in grazing, but we're interested in doing hemp. So we've identified areas that are easy access for hemp, and we're going to do those in hemp. We've identified areas that have a lot of manuka, so we're going to do honey in those areas. And then we've identified areas that would have been kahikatea forest areas. So what I've done is I've taken some aerial pictures of my land, of our land, and basically I'm going to reforest this part, and I'm going to reforest this part, and I'm going to reforest this part. And then we just basically look through Hukaranui. Hopefully over time, as more Kaitiaki-minded people move back to the area, that we can basically spread this by showing for a prototype that this earns more money and is more beneficial to the ecosystem. So then we turn it into something that's popular and it spreads throughout our community. So, and how does hemp help with the reinstatement of native ecosystems? This plant just keeps popping up, doesn't it? Hemp can grow in a wide variety of terrains and soil types. It forms deep roots, helping to hold the soil together. This in turn prevents soil erosion. In fact, hemp also increases the microbial content of the soil. So what we can do is replace our pine forests with a few years of this to make our soils good enough for natural forestry again. The stem and leaves of the hemp plant are rich in nutrients. After harvesting, these nutrient-dense remnants of the hemp plant can be returned to the soil, rejuvenating depleted soils like pine forest harvested soil. So hemp can eliminate toxins from the environment as well. Hemp is so effective at absorbing toxic materials, it has even been considered for removing radiation. That's pretty impressive. And hemp is unique in that it is one of the few crops capable of reducing carbon emissions through rapid carbon dioxide uptake. So this is a pretty awesome fact. For every tonne of hemp produced, 1.63 tonnes of carbon is removed from the earth. So we go from that, and we could possibly go to this. Meadow forestry, and Kauri forestry stands, or totara, or even kahikatea, which the English took for their sails. Economic growth. So this is what our politicians and our business people want to hear, and that's probably all they want to hear. So we'll give them some cost-benefit analysis. We've allowed nature and the economy to be separate entities that degrade one another for too long. We have the means to join the two together into the term ecological sustainability. As you've seen, this doesn't just contribute to solving our endemic wildlife crisis. It also helps solve a variety of issues. All of the sustainable income avenues highlighted here are more profitable, less time-consuming and space-saving than conventional farming practices we employ today. Now I know this to be true because out in Hukaranui, our farmers are trying to do animal agriculture just on the boundaries of the forest, and every week they're losing herds. And they lose heaps of them when they're calving, and they end up on our property. They'll break off in herds and they'll go off into the forest for ages, and the farmers will kick and scream about it, and say stupid animals, and I'll say to them, but they're migratory animals that you're trying to keep in a pen. Solutions to problems don't reside in silver bullets. We've heard that before. They require a multitude of angles to cover many bases to be holistically successful. Everyone knows what that is. Alright, so we're going to do some costings. Aerial 1080 for our area of 12,717 hectares costed approximately $38.20 per hectare for 3 days of pest control because it rained on the 4th. So it didn't work.
Absolutely.
This means that wild mammal management through this method over the required area of 24,500 hectares, so this includes the areas that they'll reinvade from. So I'm not looking at this at just the Russell State Forest, I'm looking at the Ōpua Forest, I'm looking at the Northland Forest, the Hukaranui Forest, the Ruapekapekas. So that's about 24,500 hectares. That costs the taxpayer just over $930,000 per year with no resource or revenue gain. And it's rising. It's called inflation. It is estimated that the total cost of all the processes surrounding Aerial 1080 is around $120 million a year. It is set to increase as the area has almost doubled this year. It's not sustainable. And it's not cost effective. It's not producing anything but debt. So, nā Kaitiaki the Guardians. So what I did was a cost-benefit analysis of this model. And what I worked out is if land care research, if the research they've done in possum numbers is correct, then I would estimate that the Russell State Forest, based off that research, has 4 possums per hectare. Now, trappers' estimate in our area is that it's more like 8 to 10 possums per hectare. But we'll go off 4. If we're trapping 4 possums per hectare, and we have trappers covering that, all the revenue that comes from that, not just from the hunters that get the fur or the pet food, but from the pet food places and the fur selling places, basically every process that product goes through, which we call GDP, it generates $11,580,000 per year in GDP. Wow. Just from that forest on the lowest numbers that we consider. Now that's 1.7 million if everyone's tax rate was 15%. Wouldn't we love that? That's 1.7 million per year. For this model, it costs $3 million to start up and then $300,000 per year every year. And that's for the bait. So you've already, after 10 years, wiped out your costs and you're making profit. Now, this model didn't need all those costs, what I realised. Trapping worked and was cost effective because it was producing a resource. Land care research, when they worked out that it wasn't going to be beneficial, they didn't do any of that cost benefit analysis based on the resources that were produced. They ignored all that. Because they realised that if you're trapping a line successfully, trying to keep them to the low numbers that Doc wants you to keep it at, it's no longer good for you. So all I said was, why don't you just introduce technology that shows you where all the high numbers are, so you're not trapping low areas when they're low. So we had a bit of a think tank on technology that we could develop. So instead of putting tracks all through the forest, but we can do that, we can develop non-pathogen spreading footwear. So we can actually have an inlet where we put whatever substance will stop the soles of your feet spreading pathogen everywhere and cause it secreted out as you walk. And you can hire that out to tourists that come into this country and say you can't come into Kaitiaki forest unless you're wearing these shoes. And we've got the wildlife monitoring drones, and that's just repurposing existing technology. We've got a slug drone. So one of the things I had to basically develop to show that it could meet the predator-free expectations in terms of you can't wipe out possums with just trapping, or bait stations for that matter. You have to actually design a piece of technology that makes their survival instincts work against them. So when they're disturbed, they climb up into a tree. So, and if you're holding a slug gun, it then becomes more impossible for you to get them. Problem is, if that slug gun is on a drone, the higher they climb up into the tree, the more doomed they are. And this meets in with the SPCA's preferred way of basically killing an animal if an animal has to die, which is a direct bullet to the head. Now I've been trapping now for 3 years, and every kill that I've made, I've hated it. I've never been someone that has enjoyed doing it. And I always felt like I had to put myself through the ordeal of actually doing it with a club. And you know, I've worked with trappers that will leave them on their leg holds and walk off. You know, what are you doing? Get back there and put that thing out of its misery. Some of them have pulled their legs off trying to get out of the trap. So there needs to be technology that suits both the industry and the well-being of the animal. That's not impossible, because people are designing technology that is doing far more difficult things in other areas. That's why I call repurposing technology up there. Satellite interactive navigators, so we've already actually got these. You can fit up iPhone into a satellite docking thing and that can connect to any satellite. We've got the chainsaw drone. Now, that's almost finished. Dogs. They're a threat to Kiwis. Not my dog though. She's Kiwi aversion trained. Okay? Now my dog is also not a threat to our chickens. She's not interested in them. And many people's farms aren't interested, their dogs aren't interested in chickens either. We train them and we get, if we have to pay registration for our animals, we should get it back in the service. And that should be the service for rural people. Alright? If you turn these animals into an asset for these ground-based birds, you can introduce these ground-based birds onto these Kaitiaki sites. Stoats won't come, stoats and rats and possums don't go anywhere near our house because she's out there. And she's allowed to kill them. Good nature trap development of more effective and humane live traps, so we've already got the possum one and the A24, and we've already talked about that. Kaitiakitanga, that's what this is about, creating more kaitiaki in this country to practice kaitiakitanga. Around the Russell State Forest, we have many zones to practice kaitiaki. And in the middle, a kaitiakitanga hub to support hapu. Because it's time we started investing in kaitiakitanga, not predator free.
Yeah.